India, Japan and America conduct a trilateral joint naval exercise known as Malabar exercise in Indian Ocean. And Australia requested India to join in 2010 to be a part of this naval exercise. But suddenly, when it was about to give a go-ahead to its ships for the exercise, it was threatened by China to pull out. And yes, Australia pulled out from Malabar exercise due to the Chinese threat of import cuts. Australia is so much dependent on China that it let itself be bullied by the Chinese and pulled back from the naval exercise. Now, the Maurice Johnson-led Australian government really want to piss off China and want to be a strategic power to reckon with in the Indian Ocean. Well, earlier it was known as the Asia Pacific, owing to its geography. But all hail Trump, who made a geostrategic masterstroke and called it the Indo-Pacific, acknowledging India's superiority and role in keeping China out of Indian Ocean. Now, this informal group known as the Quad is being largely perceived as the Asian NATO by the Chinese strategists. Actually, all the Quad members are very much pissed off due to the Chinese aggression in their respective neighborhoods. Look at this map of Indian Ocean for a second. China is claiming the whole of South China Sea, that is the lifeline of its maritime trade and blessed with huge reserves. And in that quest, China has pissed off almost all the ASEAN countries. Now, China has an active border conflict with India, and Sino-Japanese relationship has been very pathetic since the World War II, when Japs masqueraded the Chinese Manchuria. Now, the American has their world dominance at the stake due to the rising Chinese cloud. Now, China has a strategic threat in Indian Ocean. No doubt, it has got an upper hand in South China Sea, but it has two weak points. Indian Andaman and Nicobar Islands and the British island of Diego Garcia, that is acting as an American military base in the Indian Ocean, can counter the Chinese string of pearls theory. And consistent Indo-US naval engagement with the rest of ASEAN has been quite successful in scoring down the Chinese threat. Nearly all the neighbors of Chinese, except spineless Pakistan of course, are very much in conflict with the China regarding border or territorial water disputes. And here, Quad could become the next big thing to scare the hell out of China and its Chinese Communist Party. Now, the question of the viability of having Australia and India as an important members of the Quad could undermine its value, as both these nations in the past haven't been willing to annoy China. But certainly, this changed a lot in the recent past. Now, let's look at what makes the Aussies and Indians a more reliable partner now than ever before. Starting with the Australia. The Australian export to China far exceeds its total export to all ASEAN countries put together. Just look at the figures around yourself. Export of mineral and mine constitute almost half of the total export of Australia, and China is the biggest consumer of Australian minerals and mines. And very recently, Chinese reduction of wine imports from Australia as a counter reaction to Australian misdemeanor regarding COVID-19 accountability, Hong Kong protest, South China Sea dispute, promotion of Huawei in Australia, and growing influence of Chinese in Australian politics and academia, and whatnot. It all shows that in this trade game, Australia gonna be the biggest loser. But Australia might want to take this call right now, as it has been largely bullied by the Chinese in last 2 decades. And as we know, trade is not holier than the sovereignty. Hence, Australia was the weakest link to the Quad, turning into an Asian NATO against China. But this has changed now, as the Aussies are more determined than ever before in standing up to the Chinese. Now let's dig into the second weakest link in the Quad, India. Global strategic observers have consistently bashed India for being a laid-back diplomat in global theatre. And this is not a trivial issue to understand that the first iteration of Quad in 2007 fell apart largely because Australia and India got cold feet over how much to annoy China without impacting other dimensions of their bilateral relationship with China. However, not to blame the Indo and Aussies altogether, Japanese and Australian electoral politics also to be blamed for this failure in realizing the Quad in 2007. But India under PM Modi has seen an incremental reversal in its approach towards anti-Chinese and pro-West policies. Hence, the Indian side is very much eager in Quad this time. Starting in May 2019 with the appointment of S. Jaishankar as Minister of External Affairs, who is a strong advocate of Quad for a long time. And S. Jaishankar was able to persuade Indian Prime Minister to accede to the request of Japanese Premier Shinzo Abe that all Quad country leaders sit together right across from the Chinese President Xi Jinping at the G20 summit. A symbolic, albeit implicit show of support for the Quad and a threat to the China. In recent months, India's relationship with China has largely deteriorated, particularly along their disputed land border known as the line of actual control in the Himalayas. Although the two sides on July 5th agreed to end their military standoff, the damage appears to have already been done. Even the most ardent supporters of maintaining balanced China ties are hardening their position in India, which makes it increasingly likely that India will turn to the Quad to counter China actively. Indeed, the month-long military standoff in 2017 between India and China at Doklam, a tri-border junction between Bhutan, India and China, may have been the tipping point for New Delhi to return to the Quad later that year. And Japanese support of the Quad has never been in doubt, namely because it was Shinzo Abe's idea in 2006 to convene like-minded democratic partners in a quadrilateral format to counter China. Nevertheless, while Australia and India become more comfortable in the arrangement, Tokyo is wasting no time to improve its ability to be a better partner within the Quad framework. For example, last month, Japan revised its intelligence sharing legislation to allow for sharing of confidential information with Australia and India, and of course UK as well. Japan already regularly shares intelligence inputs with its US ally. And also last month, Tokyo officially established a new division within its Ministry of Defense to enhance coordination with New Delhi and Canberra on ASEAN and Pacific Island issues. Tokyo released its annual defense white paper in which it stated that China has relentlessly continued unilateral attempts to change the status quo by coercion in the sea area around Senkaku Islands, leading to grave matter of concern. Senkaku Island is a disputed territory between China and Japan. Finally, the Uncle Sam. The United States under the Trump administration has embraced the Quad as a mechanism to maintain a free and open Indo-Pacific region in the face of rising Chinese assertiveness. Of the four countries, the United States may be the most anti-Chinese, as bilateral relations between China and US has spiraled over a range of challenges, including coronavirus fallout, Taiwan, South China Sea, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang human rights issues, intellectual property theft, press freedom, and others. Indeed, United States is the only country to directly label China as adversary in its national security strategy, national defense strategy, and Indo-Pacific strategy reports. However, to date, the US has resisted the urge to convert the Quad into an anti-Chinese grouping, probably at the behest of other more hesitant participants of the Quad, like India and Australia. But now it is set to change because the others want the change. India and Australia are more active and more assertive in their stand against China.